Are you ready for this year's fantasy football draft? And are you ready to dominate? Well, we're here to help. Let's see if you're ready for this year's draft. What's going on, guys? We're here to help you get prepped for your fantasy football draft this season and make sure you're not forgetting key points that may help you dominate your draft. But first, guys, let us know in the comments below what your favorite fantasy draft moment is. Whether it's just getting together with the guys, having some few laughs, or sniping those picks before you know your friend wanted them. Comment below and let's compare and see what stories we can share together. All right, guys, first we're going to talk about the preparation that goes into setting up your draft. Listen, I like to set my guys up to tiers, little boxes of guys I believe are going to be high scores. I look at the projected scores, figure it on my own target analysis, and try to set those guys up in tiers. So I know if I'm getting a tier 1 at certain players, tier 2, tier 3 in each position. So that way, listen, if somebody gets left out and I really think it's a steal at the draft, I'm not going to look at the ADP. I'm going to draft according to my tier system and come out with the best team I think is going to be possible on paper. Don't forget about looking at strength of schedule as well. I like to look at these before I set my tier systems up because, listen, if you got a guy who you think could break out and you look at his strength of schedule and it's set up to be a phenomenal season for him, why not? Take a look at somebody like Dak Prescott last year. Everybody knew that the first half of the season was going to be difficult, but that second half, he should have blown up. I stayed away from it just because of that first half jitters. I wanted somebody that was going to be consistent all year long, especially in a QB1 league, but he was a difference maker and a league winner last year. Look at those strength of schedules when you're setting up your tier systems and go from there. Offensive line rankings. Offensive linemen change every single season. It's improvements. There's some adjustments. Some guys were great against run blocking last year, now better at pass blocking. Whatever the scheme calls for, they're going to adjust their offensive line accordingly. Don't forget to look at offensive line rankings. And then finally, look at your injury report. Who's got some soft tissue injuries that may be lingering into the season? This year alone, CMC has come down with a calf injury. Soft tissue injuries can always be iffy, and they can tend to linger throughout the whole season. Hamstrings are the same way. Take a look at your injury reports and see if maybe those guys need to be dropped down a peg or two. Now, if you're going to get them at a great value, there's no harm in getting a great player at a value in case it does work out for the player. Now, along with that, you need to make sure you know your league scoring system. Is it a full PPR, half point PPR, 3 receiver? Is it a super flex? Is it a 2 QB league? You need to know these going into your draft so that way you can set up your tiers accordingly. Just the other day, I had a draft. We did one a little early this year. We got some guys going on vacation out of the country. Everyone showed up the draft. There was maybe half of them who forgot that it was a 2 quarterback league that we were drafting for. So all of a sudden, everybody went into panic mode and maybe started reaching on some quarterbacks a little bit early. The key to this is to know your scoring system for your particular league. So that way you can set up and pre-draft according to those setups. Next part is when you're setting up and preparing for your draft, know your league mates. Know who's drafting where, who's possibly going to start that awkward, weird quarterback run a little earlier than it's expected. Who's going to be the guy that drafts all the running backs? Who's the guy that always loves going after those stud receivers? And who's the homer guy who loves to make sure he gets somebody from his team onto his fantasy squad just because that's what he does? Pay attention to those things. Like I said, know your league mates. Now, after you set up your tiers, look at what rounds are going in and what your league mates might do. That's what I said. Know your league mates. Okay. This is where you're going to set up what guys could possibly be available in those certain rounds. Go through each round with a list of 3 to 4 names that you want to target in those rounds. Now, you might not get everybody you want, but if you're looking at grabbing a guy in the 3rd round, and you have a list and all 3, maybe a list of 4 names and all 3 of those other guys are gone, you've got the guy that you were aiming for in that round. Target guys in certain rounds, especially in those middle rounds, those RB dead zone areas where the running backs just aren't as strong as they are in the first part. You're looking to fall back, maybe grab some receivers, get a little more depth, hit some home runs later in the rounds. But you want to target certain players in certain rounds. Now, remember, depending on your first 2 round picks is kind of the foundation of your team. What setup is it looking like it's going to be? It's going to be a hero RB setup, a 0 RB, high T, or a balanced setup. Those things you need to know. Okay, I've got my solid running back. You drafted Breece Hall. You can look to go receiver heavy in the next couple of rounds, and then maybe look to get those stragglers in those dead zone areas, like this year, Alvin Kamara, a Joe Mixon, to set up your RB2 situation. Or you can go high T. I know in the draft we did the other day, the early draft, I went high T. People were snagging up receivers and quarterbacks early in this 2-quarterback league, and I just went high T to solidify that I had solid running backs that were catching passes out of the backfield. Next, you want to identify your breakouts and sleepers so that way you can target them in their ADP range. You don't want to reach for these guys. You want these guys to fall at value. That's why they're sleepers and breakouts. But if you're drafting them way too early, you kind of lose your value that you drafted them at. Now, if you really want to, listen, it is your team, drafted accordingly. I'm just saying, get the most bang for your buck, because you can set up a better team by just waiting a couple more rounds and grabbing those sleepers and breakouts in your targeted areas. Like I said, you're not going to get everybody you want, but you just want to optimize your team and come out with the best team on paper that you believe can win your league. Check out our next video where we're going to identify breakouts and sleepers. Along with this, pair them together and come up with your best draft plan you can come up with. In the comments below, identify some draft strategies you guys have that you are kind of used to and you like to approach every single season. Guys have tendencies, like I said, know your league mates. Everybody likes to draft a certain way. Are you able to change it up? Do you mind going a different route, or do you stick to one strategy you mind? Comment below and let us know what your strategy is every single year in the fantasy football draft. Well, guys, remember, be prepared as possible. This is the way you're going to dominate your leagues. Remember, you're going to have guys who are just winging it when they come in and looking at that ADP according to what platform you're drafted on, and they're just going to go with that. Be the guy who's most prepared, and you're going to dominate your league every single season. Now, guys, follow us along. We're going to be covering fantasy football content all year long. We also cover other sports content. We love talking sports here at Vegas Guys Locker Room. So please join us on our journey. And if you don't have time to watch videos, check out our podcast where you can get wherever you can get your audio podcast. We're available there. We do an extra podcast every week just on audio. And this one's a little bit longer and it breaks down a little more in depth and gets more opinions. So please join us wherever you get your podcast there. And please follow us here on YouTube and check out some of our other videos to help you prepare for this year's draft. All right, guys, that's all I got for you today, and I will see you in the next one.